You call it Siderahan. The special one, the precious one.
These are just 3 of Canada's more than 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Their case is closed by police, declared no foul play, accidental death. But for their families and friends, questions still linger. These families all say they believe racism affected the police investigation, and they're looking to the MMI-WG inquiry for help, but they're not hopeful. Tricia Johnson is Cheryl Ann Johnson's younger sister, her best friend.
She just wanted kids, I think. She wanted a lot of kids, and she wanted a family. She wanted a life. My parents split, and my mom moved out. It was hard, like, on all of us, because you're used to, you know, my mom cooking every meal and doing our laundry, and then after she left, my sister did it, right? So she took on that role.
It was a regular Saturday night for the Eskasoni sisters in May 2001, though none of Cheryl's closest friends went out with her that night in nearby Sydney, Nova Scotia. The next morning, Tricia went to her mom's.
And then I get there, and I see all the cars, and I know someone's dead. I don't know who. And I'm sorry to say, but she's the only one I said, like, please, no.
Cheryl's body was found on this Sydney boardwalk by a man walking his dog.
So this is the area, like I'd say from here to here. The tide goes down, so when the tide went down, there was a lot of rocks that were exposed, and they were all like slimy. And where her body, where she was floating and her pants were down and such, whatever, all the scrapes she had on herself, they said it came from rocks. And I was telling my family, all those rocks are slimy. There's no way that those rocks are going to scratch your chin and bruise your arms. And she had scratches all over her knuckles, all over her knees. And they were saying it was from the waves and her body banging against the rocks. And I was like, how can that even be? It was dead calm, like no wind, not a ripple in the water that morning, not a ripple. I don't think she went in on her own. She wasn't suicidal. She wasn't out to hurt herself.
She was just 23. Police told the family that Cheryl drowned while drunk. But for Tricia, the story just doesn't add up.
The next day, there's a witness that says, I tried to call in to make a statement, and they tell me case is closed and hang up.
She started her own investigation. And when she finally got her sister's police file after years of trying, she said she saw a different story. Numerous witnesses placed Cheryl with the police that night. We were looking for her. She got chucked in jail. She had been thrown out and thrown in the drunk tank or into jail or whatever. I heard a guy went into the bar and said the police took her. And describe a fight at Smooth Herman's, a notorious nightclub where Cheryl was last seen. I guess she got into an argument. Anyway, she pushed this guy, and they kicked her out. 2 years later, more witnesses came forward. He just said he knows what happened, something about a bra, and she didn't drown. They were like, they're bragging. They were bragging about how they did this and how they did that, but they didn't tell me what it is that they were doing.
I think they tried to rape her. Tried, because they didn't succeed.
When Tricia finally met with police, she said they rushed that meeting.
We came in and he told us, all right, now we don't have much time. You guys can skim through all of this, is how he said it.
She says she believes the police closed the case so quickly because her sister was Indigenous. Police have a legacy of racism here. It's where Donald Marshall was wrongly convicted of murder.
The evidence to date suggests a concern over the treatment afforded minorities.
But another, more recent inquiry is on Tricia's mind.
You're saying, okay, your sister's in the inquiry. What does that mean? Because I waited a whole year for them to do something. I'm the only one that did anything.
Jackie Hansen is a campaigner with Amnesty International. She says suspicious deaths like Cheryl's leave families on their own to investigate.
They're forced to take on this role of, in a sense, investigating their loved one's disappearance or death themselves. Everyone wants this inquiry to move forward in the best way possible.
Cheryl Maloney of the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association says families may need to be patient. We caught up with her at this community hockey game in Truro, Nova Scotia.
We have to prepare our families to know that, if you participate in the inquiry, and there's an option not to, that you're doing a service for Canadians, you're doing a service for other families, you're doing a service for our kids to know, uncovering these issues. But it may not give the families anything they need.
The inquiry will have its work cut out for it here in Nova Scotia. Jane Paul is another Indigenous woman found dead. The 33-year-old was found OD'd and propped up against this pole on a busy Sydney street, 15 years after Cheryl, in spring 2016. Bernadette Marshall was her friend.
Why didn't they stop?
She said police drove past Jane a number of times.
I was so angry that why didn't somebody stop to help her? Why was she discarded like garbage? Like this garbage bags here, that's the way I felt.
Cheryl Maloney says the closed cases make it hard for people to trust the police.
So when we look at Cheryl Johnson's family, how easy it is them to say, okay, there's a dead Indian in the harbor, she fell in, or whatever, and just to close the case. Her case wasn't even really opened. There was just silence.
Sydney police deny there's racism in their ranks. Staff Sergeant Jody Wilson worked on a key project 2 years ago, making connections with Indigenous sex trade workers.
We're very forward-thinking, and I know like a lot of the officers, they receive diversity training, sensitivity training, or annual block training, or training even at the police academy before arriving here. And I myself have not been witness to any racism in the time I've been here.
This staff sergeant worked on Jane's file.
The way she was on the road there, anybody could have driven past her at that time, including the police. I can't say for sure whether a police car did or did not drive past her at the time. The question I would have is who the person was that stood there and did nothing and watched cars drive past her during that period.
They say they did everything by the book. He could not explain all of the inconsistencies in Cheryl's case.
There's no evidence in the file that I can see where there was any type of contact with her on that night with police, none whatsoever. It seemed to be, once again, when somebody says something, somebody else takes it as gospel and tells somebody else and tells somebody else. And one person said that, that she ended up being arrested for intoxication that night, or ended up in the drunk tank, was the words that were used. And, even the people that she was traveling with that night believed that she'd been taken to the drunk tank and that they were just going to pick her up tomorrow morning.
Were the officers who were on patrol that night, were they interviewed? Because I didn't see it in the file here.
I'm not aware if the officers who were on patrol that night were interviewed or not. There is that little bit of sometimes distrust. And the only thing that...
I would call it a pretty major distrust, like particularly with the Indigenous community. There's historic distrust, there's proven racism in the Cape Breton police. So I guess I would like you to answer to that, not a tiny mistrust, but the fact that there's this division, right?
We're transparent. We work as hard as we can. We don't look at race. We don't look at color. We don't look at religion. When we get a file, we just look at that file itself. And what I would put back to people is that we need your trust.
Thousands of kilometers away here in Leaf Rapids, Manitoba, the stories of Jane and Cheryl resonate with Don Anderson's sister, Leanna.
You know, with the RCMP, the one question I'd ask them is, if that was your sister, would you have done everything the way that you did with my sister?
And we'll have that story when we come back. It would have been Dawn Anderson's 42nd birthday this year. She was the baby of a family of 11 that keep her memory close by. Especially her mom, Minnie Anderson.
She was a very special person. She loved doing things for people too, like helping out and stuff like that. And with the family, we had our ups and downs, of course. Yeah. And she was helpful and everything. I have a lot of good memories of my daughter.
Dawn was found frozen to death beside this house in the remote northern town of Leaf Rapids, Manitoba, almost 6 years ago. Witnesses described a party with two men in a garage out back. Her sister Leanna called the RCMP that morning.
It just seems so surreal with what I was hearing. And, it just seems so cut and dry. She's dead, she's frozen to death, like what? It just didn't make sense.
Dawn's brother Keith was first in the house.
So I went over there with the RCMP officer, and then my sister's house was kind of in a mess, you know what I mean? Phone off the hook, everything else and all that.
He said Dawn's two young daughters were left alone in that house for hours. And what they saw haunts them to this day.
My mom didn't come home. We watched the police. They had their truck and they put a big long thing in the back of the truck. And I told her, I said, who was with you? And she said, nobody. We were watching from the window. How could that happen?
I think I have to use any mechanism or any vehicle that's made available to me. Otherwise, I'm doing injustice to my late sister.
Hilda Anderson Pierce is another of Dawn's sisters.
With the way that they treat Indigenous women and girls, when they do their investigations, they don't give the same quality and quantity of service to Indigenous women and girls as they would to somebody who's non-Indigenous. There's a lot of racism there, and whether or not Canada wants to admit it, it's there and it's blatant.
Leanna said RCMP didn't call an ambulance, even though there's a health center right in Leaf Rapids.
To the untrained eye, they could appear to be dead, and in actual reality, you can save them. You can bring them back. But they didn't give my sister a chance to see if we could bring her back, to see if there was hope of saving her. because they didn't even call the ambulance. They didn't take her to the doctor. They didn't take her to the clinic.
What happened next raised more red flags for the family.
All of a sudden, her garage, somebody set fire to it, and all of it, it just didn't make sense. I'm thinking, like, what is going on? What is going on? It just doesn't make sense. Like, what is happening here?
RCMP found the fire was arson, but they didn't connect it to Dawn's death. Hilda says a local RCMP officer even tried to blame the family.
He had the audacity to say to me, "Isn't it customary when an Indigenous person dies that someone takes it upon themselves and burns the home down that they died in?" And I just was shocked that he even would say that to me. And I was like, it took me a minute to absorb everything that he just said, because I was in such disbelief.
The family filed a formal complaint, but the commission in charge found no evidence of the neglect of duty. Superintendent Jeanette Tyson is in charge of the Major Crime Services for Manitoba RCMP.
So first and foremost, it's officer community safety and the scene, but it is very, it is sad that the children were alone in the house. I don't know for how long they would have been without the care of their mom, right?
She said an officer was with the children within an hour of Dawn's body being found. Has he been interviewed to say, did you ensure that the children weren't standing at the window watching their mom be taken?
From looking at the file and speaking, I myself didn't speak with him directly, but we don't know how the children are coming to say that, because they were in the care of the officer.
So it's possible that they did see.
It is a possibility, but just knowing how traumatic it is just for trained investigators and officers, we would be wanting to keep those little buttons, safe and from looking out the window.
Okay, so he hasn't said if he kept them from looking out the window or not?
No, I haven't asked him that specific direct question. I haven't, no.
Okay. No ambulance was called because it was clear to officers that Dawn had passed.
The medical examiner gave the direction on what, the removal of the body, and that's left up to the examiner.
RCMP did find the garage fire was arson, but say the Office of the Fire Commissioner did not look into it. And the officer in charge, who Hilda says made that comment to her, denied it when directly asked by Tyson.
The investigator has been asked if he made that statement, and he says he did not.
Hilda is a grieving sister, but she's also a very strong advocate for MMIWG families here in Manitoba. She says the inquiry is hampered by timelines that aren't realistic and money that's too little.
Are you trying to save money on this inquiry? Are you trying to, the less families that participate, the faster you're going to get things done and the faster you'll appease the federal government?
There are calls to boycott or reset the inquiry all over social media, and meetings have been postponed. Yet they've already spent nearly $5.2 million. That's about 10% of the total budget. And more than $1.5 million has gone to salaries. The clock is ticking. A report is due December 2018. Marion Buller is the head of the MMIWG inquiry.
Considering individual cases is very difficult to answer in a very direct way. I can't give you a yes or a no. We don't have our own investigative arm. We cannot, as a national inquiry, investigate cases on behalf of families. We don't have that power. What we can do is recommend that organizations, police services, coroners reconsider cases or look at cases again.
Our government is determined to do this job of reconciliation in a good way with recognition of rights.
Minister Carolyn Bennett declined an interview. Jackie Hansen says it's up to all levels of government to address police bias.
What we hear from family members is they want justice. They want justice for their loved ones. And to get justice, it's not just about understanding patterns and making recommendations for the future. It's about re-looking at their loved one's case and seeing if there was any mishandling.
These are her best friends. Back in Nova Scotia, Tricia Johnson waits for someone to take a second look at Cheryl's case. In the meantime, she's organizing memorial walks with her friend, Mona Bernard.
I look at the park and who watches over this whole area. It looks so safe, right? You're at a park, there's a playground and ducks.
Tricia and Mona brought these bridesmaids' dresses to Sasha Doucette, a local photographer. She started a red dress project to remember Jane and Cheryl.
I did this picture here for Cheryl Johnson, and this is down by the waterfront. And I chose this shot here because of the boat is right here, and you see there's the big fiddle. This is all tourist attraction for Sydney. And this is where Cheryl died. This is where she was found. And maybe they don't want everybody to know that. I couldn't believe how our women were being treated. They're being treated like dirt. Native women were powerful women. We're respectful. We deserve respect and love. These women were alone. They didn't deserve that.
It's this kind of grassroots action that led to the inquiry in the first place. The Andersons say they won't give up on Dawn, and Hilda will continue to fight. But Mom Minnie says she just wants to know what happened to her baby girl before she dies.
I don't think she froze. I don't think my daughter froze.
I don't think there are any answers. We're not going to get any answers. This is just, you just want to shut these people up because that's what I feel like. Oh, she's in the inquiry. What does that mean? I mean, are you going to reopen her case? Because that's all we're asking.
This inquiry is supposed to be about the families, not about governments. And right now, it certainly doesn't feel like it's about families.
Police in these cases say they just didn't find any evidence of criminal activity, though RCMP received a tip in Dawn Anderson's case in March 2017. They encourage anyone with information to come forward. APTN Investigates will return with new episodes on June 9th.